Hello and welcome to LDO episode 233 called Back to the Future 2, and you'll find out why in a minute. For those of you that are expecting Jack again, he's not around. I think Tony's got an update on when he's finally going to be back. I'm sure you're all waiting for that to happen. And I've been asked back to carry on with the chat that we did a couple of weeks ago. So I'm Lee, Painless 360, and tonight we have Tony.
Bonjour.
I had to catch him while he was having a drink.
Yeah,
Andrew / Frank.
Hello.
We've got NJ.
Evening all.
Curry Kitten.
Hello.
And Andy RC.
How do?
And just before we get too deep in and forget, Curry, could you do the disclaimer and then we're all legal?
Indeed, any views expressed by any guests on this show are personal and may not reflect the views of the host or any participant of the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, yeah, any problems, they're your own. So thank you for tuning in or listening on the podcast. The reason that I wanted to come back on is last time I was on, we talked about the last 10 years of the hobby, looking through the teens and the explosion of the multi-rotor stuff. And we shared a few stories and, you know, talked about when we were young back in the day. But there was a couple of other things that I particularly wanted to talk about, and we just didn't get time because the show was only an hour and we were just kind of hitting our stride. So thank you to everybody that kind of wrote in and kind of said, want the chat to continue. It's your fault I'm here. So the thing that I wanted to talk about and to chat to the gang is that I was looking to do a video around Christmas time about the stuff that I would recommend to people and the stuff that I use. I get lots of comments on my videos. I'm sure people like Curry and Andy, you do as well, about what goggles do you recommend, what radio, I only have this much money, what do you want to buy? And it's a really tricky answer, because if you have a beginner pilot that's never flown, you're probably going to give them a different recommendation that somebody that's been flying for 5 or 6 years, knows maybe fixed wing, wants to move into multi-rotor, or whatever. Things like FPV goggles are very subjective. So while I've got all these brains in one place, I thought it would be a good thing to run around and just talk about the kit that we use today, and also the kit potentially that if someone walks up to us at a show, we would recommend. Things like radios, goggles, models, other things as well. So I'll kick us off with the one that I get probably the most questions about, which is radios. The one that I still probably use the most is my trusty Tyrannus. I've had it 5 years. It's probably had most of the switches replaced at this point, upgrade the gimbals at least once. The only other radio that I've had in that I really liked was the T16, again, OpenTX. And those are kind of my two choices, unless you want something simpler. Has anyone got any kind of other things that they love at the moment that they like to fly? Tony, what do you fly with?
Tyrannus, always have. 5 years old, same as you. That's all I fly with. I haven't tried anything else. I've seen there's a new kid on the block though.
Yeah.
Well, I see NJ walking away, but I know why he's walking away.
Yeah, because he's got to get the new kid on the block.
Well, he's got a very different outlook on what controller to use, so I imagine he's going to grab it. And I think Curry, you have as well, haven't you?
I've got an X9D like all of you guys, and that was my go-to radio. But for all the new quads I've got coming in, I love the feel and the size of the X-Lite. The sort of game controller size really does suit me. I had to say, when I first got it, it felt a bit sensitive until you get the slightly longer sticks, and they make a world of difference. So that sort of size of controller on quads really suits me. If I was flying things like planes where I might have an autopilot where I wanted lots of switches and stuff, then I'd go back to sort of more the X9D. But for quads, I really do love my X-Lite and that sort of form factor, which I guess NJ is getting something of a similar form factor to hold up to the camera, or he was just having a secret wee and we didn't notice.
He's try everything, NJ. Like when we went to Makerspace, I think he bought 3 transmitters, didn't you, NJ? So come on.
Yes, I might have done. I'm sort of. I've got to say, I'm with Lee when it comes to the one that I recommend for most people to go with. This is my now very customized Tyrannus X9D that's had the I've done the antenna mod, so you can put your own antenna on. This has had full paint job. It's had the speaker upgrade. I've done various things with the switches. I've put the 6 position switch in there as well. This has had all kinds of work done to it, and of course the short throw gimbal here as well. There's so much you can do with this, and you can learn with it along the way. So if that's your inclination, is someone who likes to tinker and wants something that you can buy very cheaply and then add a lot of stuff to and mess with it, and in the spirit of the hobby, I still think that's great. In terms of my personal preference, I'm a big fan of the X-Lite, which is why I'm going to be, I'm sure, a big fan of the new TBS Tango, which is on the way to me. And I should point out as well, I'm a pincher. And there are a lot of people think that those controls are very, very much only for people who fly thumbs. And there's other people like Nick Burns, who's also like me, that loves the X-Lite, and it pinches very comfortably. So yeah, that's where I sit on it.
If you like the smaller form factor, the Tango 2, as somebody that's had one since beginning of December, is beautiful for pinching. The way they've got they're like pretty much full size gimbals in that really small form factor. Because the only thing that I don't like about the X-Lite is that because the gimbals are quite compact, as Curry said, you need the longer sticks. Otherwise, it does feel like you've almost got a game controller. But the gimbals are kind of full size. Have you gone for the Pro or the standard one of the Tango 2?
I was speaking to Wayne at TBS and asked him about which one to go for, and he explained to me the difference is basically the folding sticks. But the problem is it's got the word Pro on it, and unfortunately that little bit of marketing has worked its magic on me, and therefore I've got the Pro. It's terrible. I've got no good excuse for getting it whatsoever. I just says
to be fair, if you get the Pro and you fold the sticks down, if you know the big Fat Shark cases, the ones that we never use, that's a perfect. It just fits in there with the sticks down.
Oh, awesome!
So yeah, if I would get one now, I'd have gone with a Pro, because those sticks are quite tricky.
The portability is such a thing, isn't it? The fact that you can just chuck these in your bag, and your bag can shrink down from what it used to be with the amount of gear you had. Being able to just condense it, I think it's a big consideration. Is the size. The convenience is a welcome thing of having a smaller form factor.
You're just rubbing it in now, because I've got the non-Pro version, and I just feel this big at the moment. It's important to mention, we should say, everybody talked about the X9D, but the version that we are using is not available anymore. We've got the old version, there's the 2019 version, and they have removed the ability to have D8 natively. So I think that's important to mention if we're talking about new people to the hobby.
I like to think of it as classic as opposed to old.
I'm slightly concerned about recommending FreeSky at the moment, as much as I've loved their products, because they seem to be absolutely hell-bent on making everybody dislike them by this new upgrade of ACC TST 2.0, which will get rid of the compatibility with third-party receivers and ditching D8 and the whole, the whole debacle with let's screw up TBS so Crossfire doesn't work on it properly. It's I haven't used a jumper, but people that have seem to like it, and I'm wondering if that's now the better choice for OpenTX.
Which jumper are you referring to?
I don't know, the T16.
T16, I
Pro
think you
thing.
mean, don't you? Yeah,
not the yellow thing.
Well, no, I think it'd be this one.
That's the one.
This is the T16 Hall Pro. However, it's not all roses in jumper either, because they've parted ways, and there's a company come up called Radio Master who are bringing out the T16S, which fixes some of the issues that the Pro has. So the sliders on the side don't quite have a center point. They fixed that. They're changing from USB mini to USB-C. So that'll be an interesting one, because I know I put this when I received the Jumper TX, there's sort of like a mixed reaction, because some people have had really bad QC issues, and then others are like, no, it's the best thing ever. So it's a really difficult one.
So I've got a little bit of insight into that. So the guys at Jumper, when they created the radio, because the internals are very, very, very similar to the X10, which is one of the reasons that Free Sky kind of lost the plot a little bit over when the Jumper T16 came out, and wrote those letters and whatnot. Now, Hobby Porter actually supported and worked with Jumper, and Hobby Porter is the person behind this new version of the T16 that have taken a lot of the things that the T16 it didn't get quite right, and QA was one of them. I know Ben, one of my friends at 3DXR, got in like about 10 of them to resell, and he got stung on nearly every single unit had a QA issue. So I think there was lots of issues. I think most of them, from what I'm hearing, seem to be sorted now. My T16, one of the first ones out, has had 3 issues, and I stopped making videos on it because I got uncomfortable about recommending it. Now apparently that's all fixed. Now I'm waiting for the Hobby Porter one. Last I heard from Ben, is not out. It's all been delayed because of China.
March, I heard.
But once that's out, you know, that might be the radio that I replace my aging Tiranas. Once it finally goes bang, I don't want to go ACC AST XYZ. I quite like the idea of the color screen. And apparently, hands up those of you that have had flying D16 a servo glitch that have crashed a plane in the past 5 years. Anybody?
Nobody, because it doesn't exist.
I haven't, because I've never flown anything with a servo off of D16.
Well, there's this thing that's come out that apparently has been reproduced where, you know, one of the latest updates has been around the fact that there is this glitch, this problem in the firmware, which has required people to go out and flash their radios to fix it, which also stops it working with third-party devices. Now, you know, you can take your own view on that. I personally think that's very suspect.
That's a little bit shady.
Yeah, because as Curry says, you know, at the moment, Free Sky aren't covering themselves in glory in terms of giving us pilots what we want and trying to do anti-competitive things to limit our ability to do stuff with other kit, which is kind of where they got all the excitement and love from in the early days. So what about Free Sky? Okay, we've done that to death. Any other radios apart from Free Sky stuff that we'd recommend these days?
NJ, would you recommend your favorite transmitter? It's a difficult one.
I haven't mentioned it, but yes, I do. Although I've shown you my custom X9D, the radio I've flown the most, which is between that and the X-Lite in terms of form factor, slightly bigger, but sort of between the two, but has the bigger gimbals, is the Nirvana. Stop all the booing and hissing. I can feel the energy coming from the audience out there. But I actually really like the way that radio the radio feels in terms of flying the switch locations. It works for me as a pincher, and it's been solid. I exclusively use it. I don't use any of the FlySky protocols. I use it exclusively with the Micro TX, a Crossfire setup, and I've really enjoyed that. Now, I did get to chat I tried to chat recently with Warwick over at Underground FPV, and it's the first time in a very long time that he's actually just not replied to my "so what's happening with Underground FPV?" And it does seem things have gone very cold there. The official website is now, they've been bought out, and it's now just a holding page with a blog spot and loads of adverts all over it. So I don't know what's happened there. But if you've got one of those and you haven't updated your firmware and everything works, what I'd suggest is don't touch it. If you do want to continue to update your firmware, which is what I did, it's now, believe it or not, FlySky that have the most recent firmware and are driving the most support for that radio. So even if you've got an actual Underground FPV one, not bought from FlySky, go to FlySky for the latest and greatest firmware. And yeah, it's all working fine. But the future is, I'm not sure with that radio. It's not looking great right now.
Yeah, my worry is that we've all gone around and said this radio, but if somebody new to the hobby said, I want a radio, what would
I'd steer them away from that. Sure.
What would we say though? Is there one
that's what their budget is first?
I'd probably start them. Honestly, if someone said, yeah, I think I'm budget conscious, because obviously all these things add up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
I'd probably say X-Lite.
You know the X-Lite that you have. is discontinued and only does D6, only does D16. It doesn't do D8.
Really?
Yeah,
Well,
it's
you
a real
get the
tricky one.
multi-protein module if you're prepared to take it apart, solder it, so you can smash the bootloader, which fixes the problem. But that's a bit of a.
So
I am with NG. I do love the form factor. Someone actually asked me that this very question. He was considering Jumper versus a Tango 2, and my question was, well, how many quads are you going to have, and do you think you'll be able to equip them all with crossfire receivers? Because if that's all you're flying and that's what you're going to do, then go with the Tango 2 because it looks a great radio.
I think the other thing to bear in mind as well is the hardest thing. I always try and be very objective with this kind of question, but it's the hardest thing for people in our position, especially, to be very objective about being a beginner, because you know what you know. But when you're going into the hobby and there's just an absolutely overwhelming amount of stuff to learn. I mean, we step out of not keeping up with beta flight for 5 minutes. Sorry, Curry, and he hates the way I say beta.
Beta flight, unless you're American.
We step out of it for 5 minutes, and even with our sort of seasoned knowledge of that, and I like to think I keep pretty on top of that, you can come in and suddenly something's, or you'll open it up and you'll go, where's that gone? What's this thing now? And if you're new to the hobby, there's so much to learn already. And I think something like the X-Lite, or in that kind of ilk, something that's quite friendly and approachable and doesn't feel like I'm just looking at Darth Vader's bathroom to operate. It's a lot. I think it's a hard question for us to do that objective.
Do you know what I tell people? I think if you are completely new, so we're talking multi-rotors, you've never done fixed wing, everyone's done an RC car, but if someone's coming to me and say, right, I want to get into this, where do I start? I always say, I think there's two routes, right? You buy a cheap toy that's like a Hubsan, because that's what I did. I bought like a 20 quid. But it comes with a transmitter thing. If you can master that, then you can progress onto something like, I always recommend after that, probably an Emax Tiny Hawk. But then there's the other route of, you can buy a transmitter. So I think it's the Fly Sky, the i6, it's 35 quid. Then you buy a 7 quid dongle and a simulator. And then, the simulators are, when it comes to FPV.
Some simulators are available for free.
Exactly. Well, that's where I was going. That's where I was going, Mr. Kitten.
Links in description.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot to be, because when I came from fixed wing and I went to helicopters, but I was like, there's no way I'm just gonna try and fly a helicopter. So I got luckily my Futaba transmitter that was 35 megahertz. It fitted one of these simulator dongles, and I went on to, I think it was Real Flight Simulator, and learned how to fly helicopters. Then I bought a helicopter and I could fly it. I was amazed, although I did have that fixed wing experience.
I think the other thing, just very quickly, is that transmitters, it's not even that long ago that transmitters weren't actually that numerous in terms of what's available. And they were considered more of a long-term purchase than the way we consider our goggles. Whereas now it seems there is an awful lot of transmitters coming out into the market. So it's very subjective, isn't it? That person, do they want to make some long-term purchases, or do they just want to go as cheap as possible and see whether they like it? Very tough and provocative question, Lee. I see what you did there.
I was liking Andy's
the
video. What your video? Just posted.
The radio.
That is a transmitter, mate.
That was a brick. That was Yesterday I posted the transmitter that I learned to fly on, which was released in 1985. The way that you get the back off is you stick a penny in it and turn a thing, and the back comes off.
It was probably a halfpenny back then.
Halfpenny. Yeah. Do you know how I looked up though? Do you know how much that transmitter cost in 1988? £174. The brochure, I found the brochure. The brochure itself had a payment plan for it. That's how
wow.
That which is absolutely mad. But the reason why I say the Fly Sky is that it's most of the people that approach me, they want to do it as cheap as possible. And I think if you pile a load of money into the hobby, and for whatever reason you just can't grasp it, or you crash and you put a load of money down the pan, then I think like buying a really cheap transmitter and a simulator is a good route, because you can suck up 35 quid, but you can't suck up spending 130 quid on that's about how much the jumper is, isn't it? So I say this. I think there's two routes. There's the simulator and cheap transmitter route. If you can nail that, then and Fly Sky as well. I think very underrated, very low latency, and the only thing that it doesn't do well is telemetry. But trust me, there are a lot of people. The amount of requests I get to say, please do more Fly Sky videos, because there are people running on a tight budget.
Yeah, I see Magdalena, who's come on the girls' night before. She flew one of them, and she flew pretty far over a beach and stuff when we were out on an FPV trip, and she was loving it, and I was like, oh my god, you're going so far. I don't know if I'd go that far with mine, and she was
so let me just show you my first, to kind of bring this to the end. This is my very first proper grown-up radio that I still have. Ooh. And I can't get rid of it because it's probably full of asbestos or something, but it's a Spectrum radio. Now this was my first introduction to a grown-up radio, and it probably cost two odd times what a Tyrannus did. It's interesting that all you guys have had a similar reaction, which is, if we'd have asked this question 18 months ago, good man, my DX8 is next door. If we'd have asked this question 18 months ago, we'd have all had, because I like the QX7 is a really nice radio as well. Yeah, that's really good. But all of these radios that we would have probably, without hesitation, recommended, if you can cope with OpenTX, we're all a bit iffy about now. I think there's an opportunity in the market for somebody to come up and kick Free Sky's butt when it comes to radios.
Like Radio Master.
A last little comment, because although I haven't had as much experience as all you reviewers of different radios, I have had enough experience to know that my recommendation to anyone would be, go find your local group and have a go on some, because nothing beats.
Good point.
As much as there's details on paper that are important, and your selection of the protocol and the ecosystem that you're buying into and all of that, if it doesn't feel right in your hands, it's not going to work. Which is another thing.
That's what she said.
Well, exactly.
22 minutes. Well done. God, I'm so proud of everybody.
And I don't know if you know, there's a book that was making its rounds a few months ago, probably just before Christmas, called Invisible Women, all about how technology has been designed without thinking about kind of the anthropometrics, the ergonomics of women in mind. So like airbags don't incorporate any of this kind of area in their design. To flight suits and all sorts of things. So
I don't understand. Do you go on, Andrew?
Well, airbags. That's all I can say.
For those people on the podcast, Andrew just pointed to his chest.
But
can we say airbags for fun bags? Is that allowed?
Do you know what? If there was someone to derail this show, I did not expect it to be Andy.
Sorry, just throwing things out there and letting you derail the show. But
I never thought I'd hear something about female airbags, anthropometrics, all in the same sentence. That's just
and transmitters.
Yeah. Well, this is my point. Is like as Richard Warwick said in the chat, I think it was a little bit earlier, was that he says he's got small hands and he really likes the jumper T8SG that he's got. Yeah. And I know, when there have been events where there have been sort of women that have been passing radios around. I mean, it is a small sample size, but I've noticed a bit of a trend that the Tyrannus is not as popular as like the X-Lite or particularly the T8SG, just because it is smaller. And I wonder how much that has kind of affected the demographics. I mean, it's kind of which one comes first.
I'm so used to flying the Tyrannus, I'd be worried. It just feels right. Everything's perfect for me, and it's been 6 years of it. if I had to go over, I'd be like, oh my god, it feels like I've got to learn how to fly again. You know what I mean?
I have the same problem, Tony. When I fly the X-Lite, it feels like my rates have changed. I
Mm.
know a lot of people lengthen the sticks though, which sort of creates that almost like Expo by lengthening the sticks because the sticks are so short. But so should we move on from the transmitter?
Yeah.
I think we should, because it kind of brings me nicely on to the next bit, which NJ kind of already talked about, which is the other one that I get the most comments about is goggles. Now, this is a really, I mean, if you think radios is subjective, then we haven't talked about goggles yet. And goggles is one of those really weird things. I mean, if you think that talking about Free Sky brings out the lovers and the haters, try talking about things like the GGI HD system and Fat Shark. So if you're driving your car and you're in the middle of some sweets and you don't want to spit them all over your dash because you get wound up about pause the podcast now, because we're going to talk about goggles, what we have.
So that one.
That's it. That's the one that has a robot face.
Let me put it next to it, just to the X9D, so you can see the difference.
It's much smaller, isn't it?
Interesting, and I think, do you know what? There's a group of people that don't get enough credit for this. So way back, I went and built these multi-module all-in-one things. You had to build them, and Deviation TX allowed that. It's interesting that FR Sky have no issue with the Deviation TX versions of the jumper transmitters because they don't run OpenTX and Crossfire. You can run Crossfire, but it's a pain. But what we were saying, NJ, is we're moving on to goggles because we've done 25. We've done 25.
Don't get all your goggles in, Jay.
Yeah. So Goggle, who wants to go first with what they've got and what they'd like, and what they'd recommend?
First of all, what I want to say about all of this is that the hobby, it's very divided, and humans as people, we like to have our little groups, but I think so you've got the Fat Shark side, you've got the DJI, you've got FR Sky, you've got Jumper, and at times where like we are kind of like under threat, I think we should set all of those differences aside and just like all come together. So whether it's fixed wing you like, whether it's FPV, whether it's Halleys, getting triggered about whether we're talking about DJI or that's not, there are bigger issues out there. So that's my stance on, and for me, it's like, whatever you're into, whatever works for you, I'm not going to go, oh, you shouldn't have that. Do you know what I mean? Mm. But there are a lot of people who have that opinion, and I don't think we should. So that's
Andy, can you just hold that thought until we get to this next topic? Because I want to talk about the next decade, and I think you've hit on a really important part about us as a hobby, not dividing ourselves when we got enough people having a pop outside of the hobby. So I think that's a really good point. Well, I'll start then, as nobody has so for me, I'm very lucky. I tend to get the Fat Shark goggles for review, so I always have the kind of latest and greatest, and I do genuinely think that the HDO 2s are the best goggles that Fat Shark have ever made. Lots of people would probably say that the HDOs should have been that when they came out 19 months ago, but the HDO 2s have fantastic field of view, independent focus, just work beautifully. But going back to NJ's point about radios used to be an investment, I think goggles definitely are. And goggles for me, when people ask, if I've got my goggles on me, I'll let them have I'll power them up and let me have even if it's playing back a DVR thing, because even the shape of people's faces can make a massive difference. So something that fits my face might not fit Frank's, or vice versa. Or it might be that, I mean, you and I, Andy, you've been around when we played with the HDOs, and you had to bring your diopters and things. And some things support wearing spectacles. So there's loads of additional questions when someone comes up and asks you to recommend one. But for me, I'm quite a fan of the Fat Sharks for no other reason than when they break, you can get them fixed.
Yeah, it's a really good thing about them. The problem is it's the amount of money that you have to pile into. But I always say, you know, it's worth spending it, because I can remember like having a pair of goggles that maybe 3 or 4 years old, and they were still repairing them for free. Now other people will say, oh well, my Sky Zones never break, and I always say back to that, yeah, but because we're sort of reviewers and YouTubers, we have sort of an accelerated usage than everybody else. And from my findings, all goggles eventually break. So that's why I choose Fat Shark, even when sometimes they haven't been the best. So yeah, I agree with that. But again, entering the hobby to say 500 quid without a module is really tricky. So I think the Sky Zones sit very popular.
Yep.
And Fat Shark have got the Attitude V5, which sits in that. So I've actually got those to look at. So I want to check those out. But like you say, I actually start all of my goggle reviews with a disclaimer, and it's that goggles are really difficult to review because I'm reeling it off right now. We've all got different shaped faces. Our eyes are spaced apart differently. Our noses can be big or small, and we can be long or short-sighted. So the best thing to do is find a local group, whether that's on Facebook or a club, or go to a drone event. There's no excuses. There must be a drone event going on somewhere. You can try on a bunch of different goggles, you know, and that's how I would do it.
That's another thing I'm worried about when they break. I'm like, what am I going to buy? Blah, blah, blah. I'm really thinking about going HD, but you know, DJI. But when I tried yours on, I felt sick. So I'm going to have to try outside when we meet.
You mean you're talking about the DJI goggles? Yeah. I felt sick because of the flashing lights. I think that was a lot to do.
I'm hoping it was just that, because they looked unreal.
I can weigh in here though, right? Because I did it. I've got a video that I'm working on. So I attached the analog module to the DJI goggles, and I've got the HDO2s. And if you want the best analog experience, then the HDO2s, I think, are the way to go. I'm talking the very best. However, if you are just average Joe like me, you know, don't race, freestyle, then the DJI analog is okay. But what I did notice is, and I was surprised by this because I didn't think there would be, but there was quite a difference in picture quality when I put the HDO2s on analog and then put the DJI analog. They both recorded the same.
It's a display technology difference there as well, as we're talking about LCD versus OLED. But yeah, I mean, my preference is for years, very long time now. I've been using the HD3s, which have been great. Painless, you're up there somewhere. I'm sure you are. There you are. Look.
Hey, good man.
We're all there, I think.
Yeah. Wherever I've got room, I've been sticking them on. But yeah, my HD3s they've just been flawless. I've never had an issue with them. I've never had to send them off for repair. They're so well built. The shape has worked great for my face, as mentioned. That's a subjective thing, and it helps if you can try it. But these have been so solid and reliable and a great experience. So I absolutely can't knock these. I have personally made the transition to HD now, and I have that's why the module's missing in this, because I've got the UR-UAV adapter that allows you to run your analog into the DJI system. But yeah, it is an expensive system, and much like TBS, but even more so with the DJI system, the cost per quad when it comes to putting on an Air unit or now a Vista is still expensive. So yeah, there's still a way to go, but that's certainly it's something I'm enjoying and I'm getting used to now. But again, as we said before, it's just great to have so many options. So yeah, that's where I am.
My
Wayne,
biggest worry.
Sorry, Andy, go on. I'm just conscious that Wayne hasn't waded in for a little while.
I was just going to say, my biggest worry about the DJI stuff is, you know, what's going to happen when there's a version 2? Does that mean that like it's still supported? Because it's not, you know, we're basically working on PAL and 5.8 gigahertz just FM modulation. So it's basically a very open, very analog protocol at the moment for analog. But when you go over to DJI and it's a closed protocol, then what's going to happen?
DJI's history of support's pretty good, so I'm not too worried. But then we consider things to be old last week.
In a week,
So,
yeah.
in all aspects of our hobby, unfortunately.
A lot of people complained that they really wanted the DJI goggles to work with the Mavic, and they don't. And I know that's a big complaint of them, but it's kind of like a different sector of the hobby, and that's what DJI do, isn't it? They're a money making machine as well as a very innovative, of course. But yeah,
Curry, tell us what your.
So yeah, my experience actually as a reviewer is quite different because no one ever sends me goggles. So my proper goggles I've had to actually pay for from my own money.
No one sends me them. I paid for
You've
them.
had some Skyzo ones, but I've got the odd box goggles, and I think it's a bit like Andy mentioned about the radio. There's a couple of ways to go. You can have a pretty good experience spending 30 quid and getting yourself a basic pair of box goggles to start off with, and you'll have a pretty good flight. I find them more inconvenient to carry around rather than anything else. I've been flying on Fat Shark Dominator 3 for years and years, and I only upgraded from my original Dominators because it had an inbuilt DVRs. And it's one of those things where it is a lot of investment, and if they're not broken, it's a very bitter pill to think, I must upgrade it, because the little incremental increases in quality aren't that great. Now, if I went from Dominator 3s all the way up to HDO 2s, I'd really probably notice the difference quite a lot. But yeah, right now, my experience is still very good. If you guys went back to them after using your sort of latest and greatest, you'd probably think, well, the field of view is not very good and the display's not very good. But yeah, they
not
just
as much as you think. Not as much as you think, Wayne.
I must have put over 1,000 hours of flying into those goggles now, and aside from having to replace the sort of foam eyepiece about 4 times because it just keeps getting like sweating to death and go away, it's been absolutely perfect. So it's as far as recommending goggles, I'd say, like, if you're starting off and you've got a budget, check out a pair of box goggles because they'll get you in the air and you'll enjoy it.
Which box goggles, Wayne? EV800Ds?
Yes, because I think those are the ones that were like the Toby Rich ones, which were a copy of them, which were pretty comfortable and worked quite nicely. Yeah. And then after that, I would say check out Fat Shark because they make really good quality kit.
Well, the other one that I would recommend is the Quantum box goggle that Hobby King did.
Hobby King,
they were I mean, I don't know what's going on with Hobby King at the moment. Nothing ever seems to be in stock. But if you can get them, those Quantum goggles, they even did a diversity version with DVR in, and they were for the money they were amazing, and you could still wear spectacles with them. So even if you had astigmatism or whatever, they were. I used to recommend them all the time. It's just a shame that it's trickier to get hold of these days.
Well, they were my first goggles, but isn't the stock issue because of the coronavirus, or does it predate that?
It's gone back a little bit further than that.
Really?
If that's what they're saying, I think that's
the excuse.
Yeah.
But the EV800D, I must say as well, even though it's a long time since we've all those of us that did a review on it, and I know a lot of people I recommend it to. Not one person has ever come back and said, "I wish you hadn't recommended that." They've all enjoyed having that as a first goggle, and I still will take the base of that as a second screen to hand people.
Yes, this is the Toby Rich, which is apparently a copy of it, but I have this on the desk all the time. When I'm setting something up, I just have it, I turn it on, I make sure my OSD looks good and my frequencies are good, and it's really easy because where I wear diopters, if I wanted to show someone my goggles, they'd be like, "Oh man, I can't see a thing. What's going on?" So having something like this to carry around, if someone comes up, I say, "Oh, just have a look through that, and you'll see what's going on." Really handy.
There is something really important to know about recommending the EV800Ds. Since all of us reviewed that very first version, just as Ishin do, they changed the DVR, and if you lose complete signal, then the DVR file gets corrupted and you can't use it. So make sure if you do have the EV800Ds, which have diversity, that I suppose you could say for the price, the fact that they've got a built-in DVR is good. But if you go out of range. And I got quite a lot of static, but I could still see a picture. However, when I got home, the file was corrupt, and so that's something to bear in mind with those. But I'd still recommend them despite that, because of the price, value, and everything like that. Yeah.
Andy, good to know. Now, there is one other thing. I'm just conscious we've been going for nearly 40 minutes and we only got through 2 products.
Well, you have to come back then, Lee, aren't you? Part 3. They did Back to the Future Part 3.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, we'll all have to go. But wasn't that the one where they're in the Wild West?
Yeah, I wasn't much for that one.
It wasn't the best one. Which is, I have a question for Andrew/Frank. I've seen loads of weird stuff flying around about Mini Air Show this year.
Lots of weird stuff.
What's going on, brother? Because do I need to book my hotel or what? Because I know that you're normally dead involved in this, and one of the reasons that it runs so fantastically well is because you dedicate so much time to it. Which thanks for that, because we just all roll up and have a lovely time. But I've seen loads of things about the BMFA getting involved and loads of different stuff. So do I need to book my hotel or not?
Well, there is definitely an event happening at Popham on the 16th and 17th of May. It will have some flying and some camping. But there's a lot of details still being discussed and organised and set up at the moment. We lost Andy. Oh, where's Andy gone? Oh, well. So at the end of the last event, it was kind of decided that there would be a much bigger models and all sorts of other things that they wanted to do, make it a much bigger event, scaling up stuff, using a massive circus tent that they have there for the rest of May. So keep that there and just have a much bigger event. And because it was becoming a much bigger event, they decided that they didn't want to put all this kind of big, expensive event in the hands of someone who is a volunteer and has a day job and is otherwise, doesn't have a contract with them to, I could just walk away and they could be left high and dry. So they decided they'd start off from the very beginning they were running the event, and I would just help out, kind of giving them some pointers and contacts and that kind of thing. So that's been going on. They've realized that there's quite a lot of work involved. And
this is a shock because...
because I'd done it and had a day job. So how hard can it be?
You the smug face.
So they've realized that actually there's quite a lot involved in it, and it just so happens that the BMFA southern area, so the BMFA kind of split into kind of areas where they put all the clubs, and so the southern area has an annual gala, but where they usually have their gala isn't working out, so they were looking for a venue. Popham were looking for maybe some people more kind of experienced in larger events, and so they decided, I think that's what's going on. Again, I'm not involved in this at the moment. I'm just waiting to be told things to post out on Facebook and stuff. So,
right. So at the moment, it's a nothing to do with you. BMFA are involved and doing stuff. Because last time I saw something online about you need a B cert to fly at the event if they're in charge.
So because it was again, this plan may be changing. I think they may have looked at it and decided that actually there's more involved in a normal event. That to make a bigger event with fewer people is maybe, and doing it at the last minute is maybe not the best idea. So it might be scaled back down to kind of what it was at the previous event.
Hopefully.
But the plan was that they were going to do it on one of the manned runways. But because it's on the manned runways, where we were flying last time was going to be the car park, and that would mean basically that there'd be nowhere to fly during the night, in the evening, after hours, after the public are gone, because that would still be car park. And so there was kind of basically a point where they were like, there's not going to be any flying at night, apart from in the tent. And also because it's under the, like, a lot of this is down to insurance. At the end of the day, like, insurance is really expensive. It's really hard to get. We were really lucky that they covered the insurance for the event, previous couple of events. And I think they've kind of realized that if they work with the BMFA, they can get BMFA insurance to cover the event for basically free. So that's a lot cheaper than lots of money.
Right.
So it makes a lot of sense that if you're running a big event, having the BMFA involved and covering the insurance makes it a lot easier.
But is it? But considering that you've built that entire thing over the last 4 or 5 years, sorry, I'm a bit incredulous about this.
Yeah.
The last 4 or 5 years,
Yeah,
you've built
same.
this, and all of it's been built on the fact that all of us who don't, the majority of us don't have BSIT. I know people like Andy RC and stuff do because they've done the hobby before. But we all get together. It's a and for those of you, actually, is it worthwhile just explaining what the mini air show has been for those of you that haven't been to one? So Andy, do you just want to take just a quick 30 seconds to explain what it has been historically, so we can understand why we're all so surprised?
So it's been going for the past 5 years as an annual event in early May, with a bunch of mainly FPVers, but also line of sight model aircraft, tiny whoops, flying wings, X-Class, all this kind of thing. Just getting together. In the beginning, we had throughout all the events, we've had high hopes of having it as a kind of public-facing, showing off FPV, rather than kind of all the other events that are very kind of, these are the models and they are far away. This is kind of involving people in it and getting them to see FPV, which isn't shown at a lot of events, apart from the racing, obviously.
Well, it's the devil's work, isn't it? FPV along with foam planes.
Well, to be honest, having dealt with organizing, showing out FPV frequencies, I am inclined to agree it is the devil's work. So there is that. But yeah, this is maybe a bit more. FPV doesn't scale well. They need this to scale for it to make sense. They're a business too. And so they're looking to make a bigger event, and that just doesn't really work with FPV.
The one thing you haven't answered, like
Are you doing number 7?
Like the political answer we got there, which was beautifully put. Should we book our hotel room or not? We still
if
need
you
an
like
answer.
big events,
Right.
with lots of model aircraft.
Okay,
then maybe this is one to add to your list, along with Wings and Wheels and Western Park and
I can decide
all the
from
rest.
that.
Headcorn isn't happening this year,
No,
so
it's
if you're
not.
going to Headcorn, maybe this is one you want to check
Are
out.
we all going? Because that's the thing for me. If you guys are going, I'm going. If you guys aren't going, I'm not going. So that's the thing for me.
I'm already going to think something like the Western. I love the Western thing, and Western Park is really good fun. I don't need to go to another mini Western at the other end of the country. One of the reasons I go to the mini air show is to meet all you guys and meet everyone else in the hobby. It's the community thing I'm bothered about. So if we all went, it would probably still have a laugh. But part of having a laugh is all the messing about after, the flying the tiny whoops and the night flying and just the general buggering about, which is that's one of the fun parts of the hobby.
Will still be happening. So there will
How do they stand with putting fireworks on quadcopters and flying them around? Is that okay, or is that frowned upon now?
Is that covered by the BMFA insurance?
Until I've been told who's the flight director, and then I'll speak to them about it.
Speaking of Western, though, it makes me wonder how they're going to handle it, because historically, when I went to Western Park and got to the FPV line, I expected that everybody would have to have like a B cert or something like that, and everyone's like, no, there's no one's got anything. So I wonder if that's going to cause an issue at Western this year. Oh, by the way, Lee, the fact that you've just said you're going to Western now means I'm going to Western, because I don't think these guys will probably come to Western, right, guys?
Is it
Being to
I don't know if my
every year
technical
for
is up to date.
3 years, Andy.
You're coming to Western, Andy?
Well, if trends are anything to go by, then yeah.
Well, you've been there the last 2 years, haven't you, Andy?
I've been 2-3 years, something like that.
Well, then it's a definite yes for me. For
Well,
Western.
and if you two are going, then I've got to go, haven't I?
But it's funny because, like, even at Western, we don't fly.
We just
No,
hang out and
it's
chat.
the community.
Yeah, it's
Just
yeah.
hanging out, which is the fun part. I just don't want to do it while loads of elderly guys talk about glow engines behind me and look at their nose, look down their nose at us because we do FPV.
If it changes your mind at all, I'm kind of putting my flag in the ground and taking over the marquee as our spot. And there's been talk amongst the mini airshow volunteers of organising a community build to compete with other things that are going on. So there might be something interesting going on, but
people in the chat are saying do a mini LDO show.
Yes, I've been saying this from the very beginning, but of course we have to respect the people that built up Mini Air Show. The thing is, I guess they may have lost respect.
Well, they will turn up because they're part of LDO anyway.
Well, there you go.
Funnily enough, there are I do have a list of sites that I will be going to when the weather improves.
Doing this,
to go have a look.
Teasing this, doesn't he? He just goes and checks it out. Come on.
But I do also have a lead on a potential very interesting venue for the LDO 5th anniversary at the end of August. But I won't.
Okay.
5 years? Has it been 5 years? Wow.
Can we call it LDO? My God, please.
Right. So with 9 minutes to go, that kind of brings me beautifully to the last bit and to kind of pick up on what Andy RC was talking about, because it kind of leads on from the conversation that we've just had about the fact that these kind of events, when some of these organizations get involved, they actually fundamentally unpick what has made the event popular historically. But also, I touched on it last time we were on the show. There are, I know of a number of clubs that are affiliated with, just happen to be the BMFA in this case. And I'm not really knocking the BMFA, but the clubs, although their membership is declining, and last time, Andy made a joke about that.
I'm going to meet myself.
Don't do it. So, but I know of clubs who have like 13, 20, a very small number of people that part of the club who have access to a flying field. And we're all on this podcast complaining all the time that we struggle to find places to fly. It just seems to me that, going back to Andy's point about we should all just get on with it. And if somebody likes another part of the hobby, then that's all right, so long as nobody's getting hurt. There just seems to be a real disconnect at the moment between the legacy flying clubs that do glow and those kind of bits and pieces and the modern hobby. Has anyone got any ideas how we can try and redress that balance?
Well, I think I know why that is. It's because I hate to use this term, but we are woke. We're on the internet, we are live streaming, and the people who are sitting there with, cleaning off the castor oil from their glow engines are not on YouTube. So they've only got to take their side. Poor them. They've only got the media to go off. Oh, drones are bad. They closed down Gatwick. Whereas if you took some time, to go on YouTube and just search, you'll find out that we are not the people that the media portrays. So I think that's the problem. There's a disconnect in technology. My folks, they don't have mobile phones. They don't really go on the internet to the extent that we do and find out the latest and realize that it, what's that say? How are you woke? You only go out for a chai. I'm not getting into that, Jack. Jack did something. No, I'm not getting into it.
No. Stay on target. Carry on. You're on the flow.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one because those people aren't going to all of a sudden invest in a computer and get the internet. And so is it going to be I'm trying to word it in a way, is it just going to be that our generation takes over and takes over these, because I'm in 2 clubs, and eventually someone else is going to have to fill the places of the people that can no longer turn up.
Are you talking about dead men's shoes?
No, what I'm saying is right, that when
are they shoes or sandals?
As you get
loafers,
as you get older, all right, here's a nice way to put it. As you get older, it's more difficult to fly, especially if it's cold. So those people might not turn up to the club. They may even just give up because mobility reasons, whatever, I don't know.
To be fair, I joined the club
though.
a couple of years ago, and there's about 3 or 4 older guys in my club, and they were into FPV and they enjoyed it. So
I
think there's a few out there.
This is it. What we will make fun and say balsa glow engine sandals, and they will say can't fly, makes the computer do it all. But if you put the 2 groups together, if you can get together with BFMA traditional flyers, you will find there's an awful lot in common. I don't fly glow engines, but I love watching these scale things. And once these old guys will learn that you're not flying one of these camera drones that does itself, and you have to move the sticks, and you've built it yourself, and you have to solder things in and that. This crossover actually happens. And one of the places it used to happen was at Mini Air Show, where the traditional flight line talked to the FPV guys, and there's some meshing got together.
Yeah, I think that is the crux of the problem, though, isn't it? I agree that those 2 entities can exist in the same place and have a lot in common and talk about a lot of the same things and get on like a house on fire. But how do you do that if you can't get in the door in the first place, where multi-rotors are completely shut out of clubs? And even, I've had that experience just with helicopters, let alone multi-rotors, where I've got no clubs. I've got 3 or 4 clubs around me, and none of them will allow helicopters. So I wouldn't even ask the question about multi-rotors.
Yeah. I'm guessing the answer is just to sit in the car park and fly your quad and buzz around the plane. Flying back to the car when you're done, buzz the runway, hover on the runway. That's the one they hate. Just sit there and hover.
But going back to Curry's point, he's absolutely right. Andy and I were involved in a thing for Channel 4, and there was lots of pilots on there who had never done FPV, and part of the thing was giving them an FPV experience. And I think with one exception, all these pilots that would have thought that FPV were the work of the devil tried it on it's fixed wing FPV, tried it and took the goggles off, and were just blown away and didn't realize how fantastic it was. And I have yet to put a more mature line of sight fixed wing pilot through an FPV experience and not have them come out the other side with an appreciation for part of the hobby that they could have dismissed because it's part of the devil's work. And I think maybe that's the answer. Maybe we should try a little bit harder to get in the door with these places, and maybe use some of these shows to spread the love around and give these guys a go, because actually we're not all hooligans, we're not all criminals, we're not all doing stupid stuff with FPV, and there's a whole part of the hobby that the modern hobby that they don't get involved in. And similarly, there's loads of people trying to get into the hobby, looking for the kind of advice that we've been talking about on the show, and there is lots of experience in these clubs. Some of it isn't as relevant as it used to be, but there's a lot of common sense there that can help people avoid all the common mistakes.
Have you got clubs like that near you, Lee?
I'm trying to get involved with a couple, and I'm struggling. And that's the issue that I've got, because at the moment, and actually Clive FPV was talking about in the live comments, a lot of them have blanket regulations which say no helicopters, no FPV, and so it's very difficult when you've got that, they've kind of laid their stall out. That's that black and white to kind of get in the door to say, actually, you know what, you've kind of missed the point. And I hope that people like the BMFA, that a lot of these clubs are affiliated to, and I'd love to, I don't know, maybe we could try and get somebody from the BMFA on to have a chat with or whatever, or try and change their So the next time I see a BMFA magazine, there could be a multi-rotor or a pair of FPV goggles in it if it didn't immediately combust because it's the work of the devil.
Yeah, I mean, we've had Big Andy on the show, haven't we?
Yeah.
That's his official
We've had
name.
Andy and Dave on a few times, and yeah, I mean, the magazine is always a recurrent complaint, but they say if you send an article in, they will print it. Every article that's in there is just being written by a volunteer and sent in, so it's it's open for anyone to
painless.
I think they were also quite keen to point out that they don't dictate the rules to the clubs about what should happen, but they were saying that the most common new affiliated clubs were because people got together for drone racing and stuff, and they were making their own clubs.
Yeah, well, I know you had Nige on last week, and he's doing something with the Whoop stuff, isn't he, to try and set up new places for people to fly. So maybe that's an alternative for those who need to find a place to go and have some fun with some friends. I
think he said you were involved in that somehow, Lee. Is that right, or was he just name dropping?
No, I'm talking to him about doing some stuff with that.
Cool.
Yet to determine how that's all going to work, but it could be a cute. Going back to your thing about getting the hub stand as a cheap and easy way to get into it, and using like a Whoop as a similar style thing. That's the kind of thing I'm excited about because it lowers the barrier for entry. Just conscious we're up on the hour already. How does it go this quick?
Just a quick thought, just as it sprung into my head. I'd be totally up for if I knew there were a bunch of clubs that were at least open to having someone like myself or whoever to go along with a load of gear and just be in the corner and say, look, any of you guys want to come over, let me just give you an experience for one day and then I'll disappear again. You can all have a think about it. And I'll show you some HD, I'll show you some analog, I'll show you some whoops and how small, safe and quiet they are. And then I'll show you the noisiest stuff. Just take a load of gear and just see what that little spark might do inside the club in terms of seeing who we are and what we represent. And maybe that's something we could, that feels like something maybe that could be you could approach the BMFA about and say, look, here's an idea. Why don't you reach out to some clubs? As you know all the clubs and you're affiliated with all these guys, why don't you see if they're interested in just letting a few of us come and go around and show this stuff to existing clubs that may just know nothing about it because it's, they don't like change, but they might be open to it,
Again, open invitation for me in the Northwest. If there's any club in the Northwest that's watching this, that's want me to come along to one of their meetings and bring some of the FPV stuff to kind of either do a talk or do a show and tell or give those kind of things, I am more than happy to do that if that's going to kind of, without any strings attached, just to help broaden the hobby. But to be fair, I think most of us would probably do that, given the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hoping to do that with a club that I've joined. They're open to Hallies, but I don't think they've ever experienced multi-rotors before. I'm interested to do that. I'm very, very privileged to be in a indoor club that embraces everything. We have cars going on the ground. We have tiny whoops flying around. And we have 3D planes, or bikes, the whole lot. We are so lucky with that. And you know what? There's all ages as well. I shout out to Paul, and probably not watching it, but he was back in the day where you were pressing buttons to turn, and his main transmitter's a Nirvana. So how woke is he? So we need more people.
That's the spirit of RC for me. Just everyone, all ages, and all kinds of RC stuff existing in one space. I'm very much up for that.
Yeah.
And what a wonderful way to finish the show on that positive note. Fantastic. So we have had a wonderful time. Thank you, everybody, for getting involved with this. I know it's just me kind of rocking up and asking kind of like weird questions, but I appreciate everyone's effort tonight in doing that. Tonight we have been Tony.
Bonjour. Jack next week. He's back. Everyone who's missed him.
Hey!
Foul mouth, no filter, back.
Yeah, so all the knob jokes will be back this week. Andrew / Frank.
Bye.
Andy RC.
Ta-ta.
NJ Tech.
Take care, guys.
Curry Kitten.
Goodbye.
And I've been Painless 360. Happy flying.
Bonjour.